Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Contemporary World subject.
Good morning, everyone, especially to our instructor. Good morning, sir. So, by the way, my name is Lloyd Basadra, and I will be your first reporter for today. So, before we proceed to the topic, let me introduce to you the learning outcomes about this lesson. The first one is to define what is global governance. Second, identify the rules and functions of United Nations. And lastly, to determine the challenges of global governance in the 21st century. So, what is global governance? Global governance refers to the various intersecting processes that creates international order. The fact that states in an international order continue to adhere to certain global norms means that there is a semblance of world order despite the lack of single world government. So, global governance can be thus understood as the sum of laws, norms, policies, and institutions that defines, constitute, and mediate trans-border relations between states, culture, citizenship, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, and the market. So, the goal of global governance, rapidly defined, is to provide global public goods, particularly peace and security, justice and mediation system for conflict, functioning market, and unified standards for trade and industry. And the source of global governance is international and non-governmental organizations. Though not having formal state power, it can lobby powerful states to behave in a certain way. For example, an international animal protection NGO can pressure government to pass on animal cruelty laws. So powerful transnational corporations can likewise have tremendous effect on global labor, laws, environmental legislation, trade, policy, and etc. Even ideas such as the need for global democracy or the glamour for good governance can influence the ways international actors behavior. So now let's talk about the international organization. International organization is a term is commonly used to refer to international intergovernmental organizations or groups that are primarily made up of member states. One of the fallacy about international organization is that they merely amalgamation of various state interests. Many scholars believe that IOS were just venues, where the contradicting but sometimes interesting. Agendas of countries discuss no more than talk shops. What has become more evident in recent years, however, that IOS can take lives in their own. So international non-governmental organizations are not-profit voluntarily association operating at the international, transnational, or global with members or participants from many countries. Are growing involves members and influence around the world. INGO range a wide lanes, scope, size, membership, and home location. Example of INGOs includes Human Rights and Doctors Without Borders. INGOs have increasingly been involved in the policy making in the policy process. So under this international non-governmental organization is the international organization as a term is commonly used to refer the international intergovernmental organization or groups that are primarily made up of member states. So an international organization is one of include a member for more than one nation. Some national organizations are very large, such as business, corporations, others are small and dedicated to a specific purpose, such as conversations of a species. So now let us discuss the three following powers of an international organization. So the first one is the international organization have the power of classification. The second is the international organization have the power to fix meaning. And the last is the international organization have the power to diffuse norms. So now let's proceed to the first power, The number one is the IOS have the power of classification. Because of IOS can invent and apply categories, they create powerful global standards. For example, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. The UNHCR defines what refugee is, and since the states are required to accept refugees entering their borders, this power to establish identity has concrete effect. Yes, indeed. Because international organizations can invent and apply categories, they create powerful global standards. Example of this is the UN High Commissioner for Refugee. Or the UNHCR defined what refugee is, and since the states are required to accept refugees entering this border, this power to establish identity has great effect. So by the way, at the top of the presentation is the logo of the UNHCR. It has maintained to provide international protection and assistance to the refugees and together with the government find solution to their needs. The UNHCR also protect stateless person and works to prevent and reduce statelessness, and it acts as the global cluster lead of the protection of co-leadership in the area of coordination, management, and emergency culture in respect of internally displaced person. So the second is the international organizations have the power to fix meanings. This is a broader function related to the first. Various terms like security or development need to be well defined. State organizations and individual views international organization as legitimate sources of information. Like for example, recently United Nations has started to define security as not just safety from military violence, but also from environmental harm. So the international organization is the command to create a concrete definition based on their level has been structured to, to every state member through various wars and conflict. The United Nations states a specific definition, as mentioned, security covers any forms in order to maintain a peace in order and development, setting standard and considering a stage or country as developed. So the third power is the international organization have the power to diffuse norm. Emphasize the missionaries of our time. Their power to diffuse norms stems from the fact that international organizations are staffed with independent bureaucracies who are considered expert in various fields. So the possible explanation will then be offered to be arguing that international organization identity not fixed and that international organizations are known consumer well as norms diffusers. The argument will then be made that international organizations are shaped by state and non-state actors such as non-governmental organizations and transnational advocacy networks. The fact that international organizations may change their identity in order to diffuse specific norms is important. So, according to Joseph Stiglitz, World Bank economist famously criticized the IMF for using a one-size-fits-all approach when its economists made recommendations to developing countries. So, for example, World Bank economists come to be regarded as expert in development and thus carry some of the form of authority. They can therefore create norms regarding in the implementation and conceptualization of development project. So, the arguments that international norms shapes state was expounded in more detail in the book National Interests and International Society, where provide an additional tool cases of how growth an organization and an international non-governmental organization diffuse international norms to states.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates. My name is Cesarina C. Corpus. My topic is what is an international organization? When scholars refers to groups like the UN or institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, they usually call them international organization, IOS. An international organization, also known as international institution or an intergovernmental organization, is a stable set of norms, and rules meant to govern the behavior of states and other actors in the international system. International organizations serve many diverse functions, including collecting information and monitoring trends. World Meteorological Organization, delivering service and aid. The World Health Organization and providing forums for bargaining. One major fallacy about international organizations is that they are merely amalgamation of various state interests. The 1960s and 1970s, many scholars believed that the IOS were just venue where the contradicting, but sometimes intersecting agendas of countries were discussed no more than talk shops. 10 types of international organizations: United Nations, World Bank, World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, European Union, North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, Intergovernmental Organizations, Council of Europe, International Chamber of Commerce, non-governmental organizations. IOS can thus become influential as independent organization. International relations scholars Michael N. Barnett and Martha Fenimore listed the following powers of IOS. IOS are powerful because, like all bureaucracies, they make rules, and in so doing they create social knowledge. IOS deploy this knowledge in ways that define should international talks, create new categories of actors, form new interests, form actors, and transfer new models of political organization around the world. So that's all. Thank you for watching.
Good morning everyone, my name is Celestine Cantado Corpus, and our topic today is the United Nations. Having examined the powers, limitations, and weaknesses of TENS, the spotlight will now fall on the most prominent. In the contemporary world, the United Nations, after the collapse of the League of Nations at the end of the World War II, countries that worried about another global war began to push the formation of a more lasting international league. The result was the creation of the United Nations. Although the organization is far from perfect, it should be emphasized that it has so far achieved its primary goal of averting another global war. For this reason alone, the United Nations should be considered such a success. And aside for that, the United Nations is divided into 5 active organs. The General Assembly, or GA, is United Nations made deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ. According to the United Nations Charter, decisions on important questions, such as those on peace and security, admissions of new members, and budgetary matters, require a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly. So there are 5 active organs in United Nations, and the first is the General Assembly. General Assembly is one of the 5 active organs in United Nations, serving as the main deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ of the United Nations. Currently, in its 76th sessions, its powers, compositions, functions, and procedures are set out in chapter. So the second is the peace and security. The Security Council has primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. And it has 15 members, and each member has 1 vote. And the third is the Economic and Social Council. Under the United Nations Charter, ECOSOC, or the Economic and Social Council, is responsible for promoting higher standards of living full employment and economic and social progress, identifying solutions to international, cultural, and educational compositions. The fourth is the Trusteeship Council. Trusteeship Council is authorized to examine and discuss reports for the administering authority on the political, economic, social, and educational advancement of the people of trust territories and in consultation with the administering authority. For the fifth active organ is the Secretariat. Secretariat carries at the substantive and administrative work of the United Nations as the direct by the General Assembly, the Security Council, and other organs.
Challenge of the United Nations. Given the scope of the United Nations activity, it naturally faces numerous challenges among these are the limited based upon these various organs and programs by the need to respect the state's sovereignty. The United Nations is not a world government, and this functions primarily because of the voluntary cooperation from the states if states refuse to cooperate. The employees of the United Nations can be severely. For example, the United Nations Council on Human Rights can dissent, especially referred to country. Human rights violation are the condition on this year activity. However, this information gathering mechanism usually fails to achieve its goals. The Human Rights Council is an intergovernmental body of the United Nations with states disclose human rights in conditions in the United Nations member. Instead, the Council's mandate is to promote universal respect for the protection of all human rights and fundamental freedom for all and situation or violation of human rights, including close and systematic violation, and make recommendation thereon.
Good day, everyone. My name is Zahira Idamada. My report is International Organization. International organizations have a power to diffuse norms. Norms are accepted codes of conduct that may not be strict law, but nevertheless produce regularity in behavior. Ang international organization daw ay may power o kapangyarihan na magpakalat ng norms. In Tagalog ay pamantayan. Ang kasing kahulugan nito ay kaugalian, kasanayan at iba pa. Ang norms o pamantayang ito ay hindi mahigpit na batas, ngunit ito ay magiging regular na kaugalian. International organizations do not classify and fix meaning. They also spread their idea across the world. Ang international organization ay ikinalat din nila ang kanilang mga idea sa buong mundo. Their power to diffuse norms stem from the fact that international are staffed with independent bureaucracies who are considered experts in various fields. Ang international organization ay ang kanilang kapangyarihan sa pagkalat ng mga pamantayan o norms ay ito ay nagmumula sa katotohanan. For example, World Bank economists come to be regarded as experts in development and thus carry some form of authority. They can therefore create norms regarding the implementation and conceptualization of development projects. Because of this immense power, international organization can be source of great good and great harm. Ang international organization ay napakalaki ng power o kapangyarihan nito ay maaari pagmulang ng malaking great good and great harm. They can promote relevant norms like environment, protection, and human rights.
That's my report.